If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. Well, they say nothing lasts forever, and unfortunately this is one of those times. Blue Sky Studio shut down this month after 34 years of running strong, and almost 20 years of bringing us animated movies. And while the studio has a pretty rocky reputation due to milking a certain franchise into the ground, and to be honest I didn't really do much to help in that regard, I think it's unfair to not acknowledge the times they got something right. For all the jokes people make about how they tend to fall short when compared to Disney and DreamWorks, Blue Sky Studios has actually had its fair share of good, and in some cases great animated movies. And today, in honor of the late company, I think it's only fair to go over the very best works the studio has put out. Unfortunately, I can't do a top 10 since they really haven't made enough movies to make the cut. They've only made 13, and 5 of them were... well, you get the idea. But they did do enough movies to at least warrant a top 5, and that's what we'll be looking over. So sit back and relax as we go over the legacy of one of the Walt Disney Company's latest victims. This is the top 5 Blue Sky Studio movies. Spies in Disguise. It's pretty impressive that this movie, in spite of being their latest and last, still manages to be one of the studio's most well-written and creative projects. The movie follows the story of Lance Sterling and Walter Beckett, members of a spy agency who find themselves on the run when the former is framed for being a traitor. The two have to work together to clear his name and find the real culprit behind a secret plan to use dangerous technology to tear down the agency. There's only one catch. Lance is accidentally turned into a pigeon, which makes things a little bit more complicated. One thing that I really like about this movie is how it manages to take a really stupid sounding premise and make it work. This sounds like something that could have easily backfired and failed, but they made it consistently entertaining and well-paced, so it does a good job keeping your attention. There's no pointless filler or annoying side characters. It keeps moving forward and everything ties together fluidly. Part of what makes it so entertaining is the chemistry between Will Smith and Tom Holland. They allow the actors to play to their strengths when acting out their characters, so you'll get an organic feel of how the two interact. It also helps that the characters have some charming personalities that work off each other properly. Sterling is a classy guy who likes to fly solo and due to his talent as a spy tends to be really full of himself. Sometimes it gets him into trouble and he has to resort to working alongside others, which is out of his comfort zone. But the movie takes the time to show why Lance would prefer to work by himself. He's involved in a lot of dangerous work where people have died and he lost people who were close to him. He works alone because being part of a team reminds him of that loss, and he doesn't want to risk reliving that pain. And because of how well written the relation between him and Walter is, you believe that he values his friendship and wants to keep him safe. Walter is also charming, if a little bit awkward and quirky. Thankfully, the movie doesn't make him into an incompetent idiot who constantly makes things worse. He's really helpful and smart and proves to Lance that his non-violent gadgets have a purpose to them. They also present his pacifism in a way that's believable instead of naive. And it's not used as an excuse to demonize Sterling for the sake of pushing a violence is bad message. The animation is also really good. Of course, there's some good mixing of color and lighting, but the fluidity of the action and comedy is its strong point. The way everything moves around has a slick energy to it, and they inject the right amount of humor into the scenes, which provides the audience with fight scenes and chase sequences that have a sense of adrenaline without getting too intense and harsh. Even the villain gets some complexity to make him a more enduring antagonist. On a surface level, he's a pretty by-the-numbers villain, but his confrontation with Sterling reveals some interesting information about him. A villain that cares enough about his henchmen to get PTSD from seeing all of them die? That's some pretty intense stuff. The movie also sends a message about finding a pacifist solution to a problem and how violence isn't the answer, which normally comes across as very preachy. But with the way the story and characters are established, they manage to send the message in a way that doesn't feel forced or contrived. It makes the statement that neither Lance and Walter are wrong for how they approach their problems while taking the time to provide something of a middle ground to the subject. They show pros and cons to both sides of the argument and demonstrate situations where fighting is necessary but also when it's not. I feel like this was the kind of movie that Ferdinand was trying to be like. One with a message about pacifism but having a much better tone and more subtlety to the subject. Will Smith as a spy who turns into a pigeon is such a strange premise for a film, and yet they made it work on so many levels. The characters, action, comedy, story, and pacing are all meshed together properly and make it into a fun time for anyone to watch. If Blue Skies is going out, it's nice to know they went out on a high note. Robots. While it's not as tightly written as Spies in Disguise, this movie manages to leave a strong impression through its ingenuity and a really imaginative sense of creativity. In a world where everything is robots and machinery, Rodney Copperbottom dreams of being a world-famous inventor. He sets off to Robot City to meet his childhood inspiration Bigwell, only to find that things are a little bit different from what he imagined. After meeting with a group of outcasts, he discovers the damage is being caused by the villainous Ratchet and his even more villainous mother, who have taken over Bigwell's business. Now Rodney and his new friends have to work together to help the citizens of Robot City take down Ratchet and find a way to bring back Bigwell to set things right. The animation in this one is astounding. Not only does everything look perfectly polished, but the direction given to how everything moves is brilliant. The animators knew they were working on robot characters instead of humans and animals, so they weren't trying to keep up with changing trends to make realistic models. As a result, the visuals of the film and the anatomy of the robots have aged flawlessly. They focus on the fact that everything in this movie is purely mechanical and made of metal, making for a stylistic choice that benefits the setting strongly. All of the characters look very distinct from each other, with so much variety to their design. And the way they animate all the little bits and pieces makes for an outstanding attention to detail to show the mechanics for how the robots move and function. The design of Robot City is rich with originality, with so much uniqueness to how the city looks and operates. Revisiting this movie years later still feels refreshing because of how astounding the visuals are. The cinematography, the atmosphere of the city, the color theory, the shapes. In terms of animation, it's one of the studio's best. The character arc of Rodney is also one that's both pretty well written and one that can be relatable on a universal level. He does come across as a wide-eyed dreamer, but there's other qualities to his character to make him more interesting as opposed to boring. He's humble and idealistic while showing an honest desire to help out others with a strong ambition as an inspiring inventor. He expresses compassion to those less fortunate and helps to inspire others to not give up. He also has a well-established relationship with his father. Herb is very supportive of his son and acts as both an inspiration and as an emotional support that motivates him to keep going, teaching him the value of following what you want to do in life and hoping to inspire his son to make a better life for himself by following his dream job. The bond between Rodney and Herb feels very genuine, as they encourage each other to take risks and bring out the best in themselves. It makes for a very heartfelt father and son duo. The villains are also very entertaining. Ratchet is humorously frantic and Greg Keener does a really good job selling how crazy yet charismatic and sophisticated he is. His mother is also deliciously evil with a really sinister look. I love the way this character is designed, with orange glowing eyes, razor claws, and a lot of sharp detail to her rusty parts with steam blowing out of her head while she slowly moves around. It's a legitimately intimidating image that makes for a menacing villain. The movie also has a really earnest message about pursuing one's dreams. It shows how difficult it is to work for a career you're passionate about but doesn't do so in a mean-spirited way, and how you can still achieve those goals if you put enough effort into them. It also has a nice sub-message about how sometimes the heroes we look up to aren't always as great as we built them up to be. They can just be regular people who go through hard times and maybe let you down. But it's always possible that our idols can pick themselves up when reminded of the true values of their work and what they do to inspire others. Admittedly, it gets sort of irritating with the comedy being too awkward and childish, or the commentary regarding upper-class capitalism being a little bit too on the nose. But it's still a fun movie that's worth going back to. Perhaps it's not on par with a lot of other more widely celebrated movies, but as far as Blue Sky goes, this one really shines. Rio. I remember watching this one a lot when I was younger, and looking back on it now, I have to say it's held up pretty well. Fitting too, since this month marks the 10th anniversary of its release. A Sphinx macaw named Blue travels with his owner Linda to Rio de Janeiro, in the hopes that he'll be able to mate with a female bird of the same breed named Jewel, in an attempt to save their endangered species. Unfortunately, things don't work out well for the couple and they get off to a bit of a rough start. But when they get captured by smugglers, they have to work together to escape the villains and free themselves from their chains, with Blue longing to reunite with his owner, and Jewel trying to find her freedom out in the wild. Along the way they meet up with some other characters who try to light the spark between them, while Linda forms an unlikely team to find her missing companion. Admittedly, this movie has a pretty generic premise, a buddy road trip story with a romance subplot tossed in the middle. But what really makes it so much fun is its grand spectacle, astounding setting, and very likable characters. Blue is very timid due to his domestic lifestyle, but is fairly educated and self-taught, using ingenuity to solve his problems. On the other hand, Jewel is much more assertive with some trust issues due to being removed from her environment, but she's also very spirited with a love for exploration, and wanting to embrace the wild and sense of independence and freedom it provides her, and the romance between them is incredibly adorable and so satisfying to see blossom. It's just really interesting to see these two characters with such highly contrasting personalities working off each other, and when they finally get together at the end it feels genuine and deserved. Yes, it's one of those romances where they knew each other for a few days and suddenly they're in love, but with how well paced their relationship was and how funny and sweet their chemistry is, it makes for a great payoff. They're very supportive of each other, they learn from each other, sometimes they get into disagreements and fights like any couple would, but they still look out for each other mutually. Their relationship acts as the heart of the film, and seeing the two together is really charming and heartfelt. It also has a fairly ensemble cast. Linda, Tulio, the orphan boy, the smugglers, the dog, and the other birds all have likable personalities that never feel too grating or annoying. And even if they don't come across as interesting or memorable, they each serve a place in the story so their roles don't feel forced or phoned in. But the most entertaining one by far is Nigel. He's such a fun and robust villain who completely steals the show every time he appears. He has a really maniacal sense of humor and a soiree charm masking his devilish demeanor, but they also make the character very intimidating, which allows him to be taken seriously when he needs to start posing a threat. He's just so committed to being a dastardly villain that it makes his entire performance a pure delight to watch. I think the element that really draws me into this one is its atmosphere. Right from the beginning, you're taken into a lush and exotic rainforest with a vibrant mix of colors and a really catchy musical sequence with authentic music and vocal performances. And from there, everything in this movie is a majestic visual experience. The film's depiction of Rio is breathtaking and beautiful, with fantastic cinematography and enormous blend of color. Every location the film takes you is interesting and fun to look at. The slums of the city, the marketplaces, the streets, the parade, the jungle, the beach, it's all great. And it's made even better with scenes that allow the movie to just relax and enjoy the setting, like on the train with Blue and Jewel admiring the sunset, or the stunning hand gliding scene. And the music is extremely catchy and exotic, with all sorts of great songs accompanied by great lighting effects and spectacle with outstanding set pieces. It manages to be really bright without being distracting or out of place. It's actually amazing to see how well this movie aged over 10 years, not just visually, but in how its story was written. The tropical atmosphere is great, all of the characters are fun, the music is fantastic, and the love story, while obvious in its setup, is still very entertaining to see unfold. With all these things put together, it's definitely amongst Blue Sky's finest. Ice Age. Well, you knew this one was coming, the one that started it all before it was milked into a rotting corpse. Ice Age follows the story of a trio of animals trying to return a human baby to his tribe. Manfred, the aloof mammoth, Sid, the bumbling sloth, and Diego, the no-nonsense saber-toothed tiger. They get into all sorts of bizarre situations where they have to keep the baby safe from harm while also forming an unlikely friendship. But things might not be safe for the team as Diego is secretly leading them into a trap, where his pack is waiting to attack. It's another premise with a really simple setup. A buddy road trip movie where the heroes have to look over a kid who annoys them at first, but by the end of the film they become inseparable and form a close bond. But the movie uses this simplicity to its advantage to tell a story that's easy to follow, with very well developed characters. Each of the three main characters have fun personalities with their own storylines that genuinely develop over the course of the film. Sid is a goofy but level-headed guy who's capable of being aware of his surroundings. His silliness never becomes a detriment and it has a purpose to how he's developed. He goes from a dimwit to a thoughtful caretaker for the baby who becomes courageous in the face of danger to protect his herd. Diego starts out manipulative and tricking others for the benefit of his pack, but discovers how camaraderie and friendship have more value. Manfred starts out grumpy and indifferent to the other characters, but over time learns to open himself up and connect to others. The bond that develops between them feels very organic, with genuine moments of banter and camaraderie between them. They strongly support the movie's message about how we're capable of choosing our families and how we can form kinship with those who are vastly different from us. And it sends the message without being overly preachy and condescending. Something that really impressed me watching this movie again years later is how it handles a lot of moments of nonverbal storytelling. There's so many moments where the characters don't say anything and you read the expression and body language to get a grasp of what they're communicating. The film handles these scenes with a lot of tact and grace and they make for some of the best pieces of storytelling in any Blue Sky movie. The scene in the cave where Manny reflects on the loss of his family, or when he's willing to put aside his grudge against humans to look after a mother's son before she passes away, that's some really powerful stuff. I've never seen this done in any other Blue Sky film, at least not to this degree, where all you need is the emotion of the characters to sell a scene. Of course, with this being a Blue Sky movie, there's going to be moments of comedy that are used to brighten the film's tone, but it manages to keep a strong balance between its comedy and more dramatic scenes. The comedic moments are never degrading as they're spaced out evenly in order to keep the progression of the plot properly paced. So when the dramatic moments kick in, they feel more effective due to the film keeping its mood consistent. And the subplot involving the humans is also knitted into the story pretty well. It takes time to focus on the baby's parents and other members of his tribe so you empathize with them along with the animals. And it also takes a clever route where it doesn't demonize humans for killing animals. It's clear that the film takes place during a harsh point in history where they have to resort to desperate choices to survive. And like the silent scenes with Manfred, they also get some great moments of nonverbal development. Even the animation, in spite of being primitive, still looks very well textured and creates a relaxing environment. It makes the glacial age look really appealing while also capturing the realism of how harsh and dangerous it was. Ice Age is a prime example of nostalgia holding up years later, as everything in it has aged fantastically. It's one of the few things I loved as a kid and rediscovered as an adult and love even more. It was Blue Sky Studios' very first film, yet it set the bar so high for the rest of the movies that came after, with its stellar storytelling, great characters, and its respectful handling of darker elements. It has the right balance of comedy, drama, and heart, which is something that I have a lot more respect for considering its lineup of terrible sequels. It's truly a great movie, and a great start for a studio that started out small. The Peanuts movie. This movie is amazing. I wasn't expecting Blue Sky to do a movie about the adventures of Charlie Brown, let alone do it so well, but they succeeded in every aspect. A lot of people have talked about how this movie is the crowning achievement of their entire history, and it's very well deserved. The story, characters, pacing, animation, music, and the way it portrays things like seeking acceptance while overcoming self-doubt and showing compassion for others is incredibly satisfying. The story centers around Charlie Brown trying to win the affection of a fellow student who's only known as the little red-haired girl, but it also focuses on other aspects of his life. His routine at school, his relationship with the other kids in his neighborhood, trying out different activities, but ultimately acting in pursuit of his main goal to be accepted by his peers. Even if you're not a huge fan of the Peanuts, this movie has plenty to like. And if you are, this movie is everything that you could possibly want in a Peanuts movie. It plays out as a slice of life story focusing on different kinds of situations Charlie Brown gets into, like a collection of stories tied into each other. But they don't feel out of place, and they all contribute to the overall plot of Charlie trying to win the affection of his crush and gain recognition from his peers. In spite of all the different things that happen over the course of the movie, it manages to have a very tight pace. Nothing happens too fast or too slowly, which keeps the flow engaging. All of the characters are excellent. The way they're portrayed here is immediately recognizable by fans of the cartoons and comics. They feel very genuine and faithful to their original counterparts, and they all have a place in the story without feeling foamed in. And the cast they got to play each of them is amazing. They sound just like the original voice actors. The animation is incredible. The way the movie translates the style of the animated specials into 3D CGI is very spot on. It captures the roughness of Schul's original works while adding its own charm and energy into the environments and individual character movements. Everything in the movie looks really solid while staying true to the weight and flat design of the characters and settings of the cartoons. It's a style that's uncommon for an animated movie, which makes it feel much more unique and faithful to the simple drawing style of the source material. The music is also a great strength, with a score that takes great inspiration from Vince Guaraldi, who worked on the music for the animated specials. It's really soft and comforting with a tonally centered harmony that gives you a warm, evocative feeling as you listen to it. There's a lot of familiar tunes taken from the specials, as well as a mix of new scores that feel in place with the more classic tracks. It feels like you're listening to an HD remaster of Vince's original work, feeling very melancholy but in all the right ways. There's also a subplot involving Snoopy daydreaming about being an ace war pilot, trying to rescue his girlfriend from the infamous Red Baron. It acts as an interval between events of the main story, but without coming across as filler. It focuses on Snoopy's own methods of supporting his companion while exploring the creative imagination that defines him. But the element that truly carries this film all the way through is the character of Charlie Brown and the story that unfolds around him. Everything about this character is just so pure and lovable. Like many of the cartoons, he acts as the moral and emotional center of the story, with a passive and wholesome nature that makes him an incredibly relatable protagonist. He always strives to work hard and do his best, even when the odds are constantly pitted against him, and no matter how many times he gets knocked down, he finds a way to pick himself up and try again. The way he reacts to the altering and mixed attitudes of those around him allows us to get a clear grasp of who he really is. A boy who struggles with his self-confidence and just wants to feel like he fits in with other people. He's sort of a lovable loser who always messes things up and makes himself look clumsy in front of his peers. But he's a very well-meaning person, and he puts genuine effort into seeking self-improvement. He struggles to overcome adversity, but he never does it at the expense of his better judgment. He remains honest and direct with people, even if it weakens his reputation. And he's also incredibly proactive in helping out others. His character arc is something that resonates on a deep level, as he always does his best to bring out the best in both himself and other people. And his story about learning to love and accept himself better is also done in a really inspiring way, because he does have that remarkable drive to keep pushing himself forward, and it all leads up to an ending that's extremely satisfying and triumphant. All Charlie Brown wanted was for the little red-haired girl to notice him, to see him for the Charlie Brown he truly is. But when he finally comes face to face with her, he discovers that she already has. She observed him from afar, quietly watching his acts of selflessness, kindness, and honesty. She saw him as a thoughtful, caring person who looks out for others and always puts his best foot forward. She saw Charlie Brown for who he really is, a great person. And the other kids see it too, acknowledging his efforts and his qualities as he actually made a difference in the world around him. For the first time ever, they all carry Charlie Brown and celebrate his achievements, celebrating the effort he put into making a difference. After all this time, Charlie Brown finally won, and all of his good deeds were eventually rewarded. He never gave up, and in the end he got what he always wanted: the acceptance and support from not just his peers, but himself. This movie is a golden achievement for Blue Sky Studios, a truly great work of art that stands out amongst all of its other projects. It perfectly captures the spirit of the source material without relying on nostalgia, and it perfectly embodies the heart of Show's work. The Peanuts is a remarkable movie, enlightening and heartfelt in all the right ways. It's a masterfully crafted love letter to Peanuts fans everywhere, and is without question the best Blue Sky Studios movie.